video is really created to help you to remember or learn how to solve systems of equations using the elimination method. We're going to start out with two equations, two linear equations with x and y, and you see those equations right here. Now the very first thing you do when you're using elimination is you have to make a decision on which variable are we going to eliminate. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's more difficult. In this case, what I'm looking for is I'm looking at the coefficients of each variable. If you see a variable that has opposite coefficients, in other words, one has a, say in this case, so we have a -3 here. If we had a +3 here, then that would have been perfect. I would have added the two equations together, just combined like terms, and I would have immediately gotten rid of the y. In this case, the signs are opposite, which is a good thing, but the opposite numbers are the numbers are different. So I'm going to really have to take a number and multiply by each of these three parts and multiply a different number by the bottom three. The goal here is to multiply such that when you add the two variables or two equations together, one of the variables goes to 0. So you have to end up with just, say, if we're going to do y, it would be 0y. Well, in this case, I don't have opposite numbers, but I do have opposite signs in both variables. So it really doesn't matter which variable I do; it's going to both be about the same. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the y variable. What we do is we choose a number, and it's really not arbitrary. We actually look and say, well, what's the LCM? What's the least common multiple of these values? And say, well, 3 and 5 both go into 15. Excuse me, 15. And so I can multiply each of those values and make them be that. So here's how it works out. I'm going to multiply the top equation by +5. That'll give me the -15 here. I'm going to multiply the bottom one by a +3, which makes this a +15. So you can see in the yellow box, my equations, once I multiply, give me these two set up. I'm going to add these two equations together, and then with the 35x minus the 6x gives me 29x, and 15 minus 15, or -15 plus 15, gives me 0y. And that's the one thing I'm really making sure that it really happens, because if that doesn't happen, then I made a mistake. Then the other side happens to add to 0. Really don't have any control over what happens to the other parts. It can add to 0, it can add to anything at all. It doesn't really have anything that it has to be. The third part, once I've added the two equations, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to take that equation that's left and I'm going to solve for x. And that's half of my solutions. I take that value, that 0, and I'm going to go back to my original equations, and you can see here at the bottom, I substituted back in, and you can see both. I've done both of these things here. You have 7 times 0 minus 3 times y equals 6. That cancels, and so you just have -3y equals 6, and divide by -3, and I end with -2. If you do the other equation, remember there were two equations to start with, I plug them into both, double check to make sure that when I plug them in, it's exactly the same answer. As you can see here, it didn't matter which of the original two equations that I started with. I could have chosen the first one or the second one to solve for the missing variable, and both of them work out to give me -2. That's just another way that I can check to make sure that I haven't making any mistakes and get the right answer. This is called the elimination method primarily because in the middle step, it's what we're trying to do is to eliminate one of the variables. The biggest problem we have when solving a system of equations is the fact that there is more than one variable in each equation. So for each variable, I need to have that many equations to solve. So here we have two variables, two equations. I eliminate one of them and solve for the missing one. This is elimination. Make sure that you know how to do this. Rewatch the video, take some notes, be familiar.